Most Viking legends and myths are far from the truth. We watch movies and TV shows that don't separate fact from fiction. And yet, the craziest and wackiest things that they did are usually true. Join us as we reveal the true origin of rap battles and expose what Hollywood made up. Too bad they didn't tell the truth, maybe because nobody would believe it anyway. Number 11. The Vikings engaged in rap battles. The way Vikings settled a quarrel between two people is wacky and something that the world should never forget. For a culture that prioritizes wit and cunningness as much as physical strength, you'd never think that the Vikings invented rap battles. The root of the word flyting means quarrel in Old English, to float in Swedish, and in Old Norse, the word flyta meant provocation. Essentially, we are referring to floating a provocative quarrel. This is the fairest description of whatever happened in ancient times when two people went head-to-head and wanted to have a battle of wits. More formally, flyting or rap battle is a form of ritual where insults are exchanged poetically. Sounds funny? Yes, it was. What is interesting about the rap battle is that drinks were served during such word quarrels. Norse literature is loaded with stories of gods engaging in rap battles, which is the basis of rap in contemporary times. This included accusations of cowardice, sexual insults, and slander. One of the Vikings' tales is that the god Loki hurled insults at other gods in the Hall of Aegir, and that Harbard engaged in insults even with the god Thor. This was how they showed intellectual superiority and prowess, taking down your enemies intellectually. Number 10. Vikings were in North America in 1021, way before Christopher Columbus. Apart from being very witty people, the Vikings were explorers and traveled into many regions of the world. You may have been told that the legendary Italian explorer and navigator Christopher Columbus is the first European to set foot on American soil or to even discover the region, but that is far from being correct. The Vikings were reported to have arrived in the Americas about 500 years before Christopher Columbus set foot there. This recent finding was a game changer in the New World Order of arrival. The archaeologists who wrote the earth-shattering story recorded that the Vikings made journeys from Greenland to North America during their entire resettlement in Greenland. The scientists arrived at this mind-blowing answer after critically examining wood samples from 5 northern sites in western Greenland that lived there between 1000 and 1400, per the Daily Mail. They examined the woods and realized that they were not a species transported from Europe during the second millennium, as the leading researchers concluded that they were from the New World. These findings linked with the Nordic history of the Vikings around that same time. Number 9. Burning funeral boats on the open water wasn't really a thing. The tales you have read may have informed you that the Vikings engaged in burning funeral boats on the open water, but that is not accurate. Yes, it is true that some Vikings, mostly the important ones, were cremated in boats. However, the truth is that these boats are mainly buried on land as part of funeral rites. They were not sent into the open water in flames. Though the funeral rites differ in the Vikings' world, many of their burials included grave goods, which are described as items that the deceased may need in the afterlife, and these goods were relative to the worth of the deceased. Their body was draped in new clothes that are specifically prepared for the funeral. The hall were the order of the day during these funerals. Number 8. They had contact with the Native Americans. Based on their frequent explorations, the Viking sailors may have had contact with Native Americans. There were battles fought between the Inuit and the Vikings in Greenland. Interestingly, scientists have discovered the genetic link between the Native Americans and some islanders, which connotes that a Native American may have probably traveled with the Vikings to Iceland. Norse history holds that Leif Erikson, the Viking explorer, remains the first man to step his foot on Vineland, which is today known as North America. He made his feet about 1,000 years ago. This means around the year 1000 AD. Also, there are pieces of evidence of trade between both parties. A Norwegian silver coin dating to the late 1000s was found in a large base of archaeological items in Maine in 1957. Some scholars in their in-depth research came up with the word that the coin is evidence of some Viking presence in the United States. While some discard this as a hoax, others believed the coin is most likely brought from Newfoundland at some point. Interesting. Number 7. Vikings believed warriors got to bring their dogs into the afterlife. One interesting part of the Viking tales is their passionate bond with their dogs. In their beliefs, they hold that the warrior's dog should accompany the warrior to Valhalla, the grand hall where most worthy warriors would meet in the afterlife. However, to enter the hallowed halls of Valhalla, the dogs would have to die. And these most times refer to the fact that these dogs are sacrificed and buried with their masters. Some Vikings believe that sacrificing the dog and placing it in the grave of their master would serve as a guide to the dog's master. Interesting, isn't it? Number 6. Viking warriors didn't wear horned helmets. This may be the weirdest for you or one of the stories that you would find hard to believe. I understand that the tales of the Vikings that you have heard or seen makes the Vikings synonymous with horned helmets. The comic books and TV shows portraying Vikings in horned helmets are not true. This is because these headgears are not manageable during close-range combat or battles for the Vikings. The narrative about the horned helmet was linked to the Viking story in the 19th century, thanks to the costume designer Carl Emil Doppler, who made the costumes worn by Richard Wagner in the Norse-themed operas. His design basis was simply drawn from the Greco-Roman perspective, as well as the helmets worn by old German priests during ceremonies. Number 5. Vikings kept bears as pets. There have been such historical and archaeological research works to verify whether the Vikings kept bears as pets, and surprisingly, most of the answers pointed to yes. One would wonder why these folks chose to keep such dangerous animals as pets. Yes, it is a familiar sight to see them keep dogs and cats, but bears? That is amazing. Bears were domesticated right from being cubs, and with this, the Iceland leadership created laws that regulated polar bear ownership. Number 4. Some Norse warriors did go berserk before battles. This part is interesting. There were some of the Viking warriors referred to as the mad dogs by the sagas of the time. Even though they carry the similitude of a legend, there were folks among them known to charge into battle in uncontrolled fury. Berserkers. Norse history describes them as strong men who fought battles wearing bearskins and could kill an enemy with a single blow. Wow, now that's terrific. From modern theories, we can now understand that the rage of the berserkers was instigated by intoxicants like mushrooms and concentrated alcohol. Number 3. They sold unicorn horns in their extensive trade networks. One of the most popular tales about the Vikings is their devastating raids on coastal lands and across the rivers. Besides this, they were also involved in trades spanning North America and the Middle East. Part of the goods they traded was the narwhal tusks, which they sold as unicorn horns since unicorns were popular in medieval Europe. This popularity was fueled by the belief that the unicorns were real creatures. Wealthy buyers thronged to the market. What the hell was this? Number 2. Some Vikings became elite bodyguards in the Byzantine Empire. Well, in the tales you have read or seen about Vikings, what remains true is their legendary fighting ability, and this made them become bodyguards for many rulers in times before the modern world. The Varangian Guard was an example in this case and was a high-ranking unit made up of Vikings. This unit protected the Byzantine Empire since the 10th century. The Varangian Vikings got into Constantinople through modern Russia. While they continued to serve emperors, their status diminished by the 1200s. Number 1. Far from being an unwashed horde, Vikings tried to be clean. What picture crosses your mind when you think of warriors who are always on the sea exploring or in the coastal regions ravaging lands? One with unkempt hair, dirty clothes, rough outlook? Yes, the Vikings spend a chunk of their time either at sea or on adventures or in coastal regions raiding villages. The Viking society took hygiene seriously. The archaeological excavations of Viking sites have turned up lots of tools showing their hygiene culture. Tools like tweezers, razors, ear cleaners, and combs. Well, the Vikings do possibly as much as they could to bathe once a week at least, and this statistic is quite more frequent than contemporary Europeans who perhaps bathed a few times annually. When it was available, the Vikings enjoyed natural hot springs.